The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home, wipers working overtime to clear the windshield. Chicago in November, always a delightful mix of gray skies and bone-chilling wind. I was looking forward to a quiet evening with Ilari, maybe ordering some takeout and watching a movie. I'm Bastian, 46, and work as a software engineer. Not exactly a glamorous life, but it paid the bills, and I enjoyed the problem-solving aspect of it. Ilari and I had been married for 15 years. We met at a coffee shop downtown, both reaching for the same sugar packet. Corny, I know, but it felt like fate. She was an artist, a painter with a vibrant spirit that drew me in immediately. Over the years, that vibrancy had seemed to dim a little, but I chalked it up to the stresses of life, the everyday grind. We hadn't been as close as we once were, but I still loved her deeply. Or so I thought. As I pulled into the driveway of our house in the suburbs, I noticed a car I didn't recognize. A sleek black BMW. Ilari didn't have any friends who drove a BMW. A knot of unease tightened in my stomach. Maybe it was a client. She sometimes did freelance work painting murals for local businesses. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. "Ilari," I called out, my voice echoing through the hallway. No response. I walked towards the living room, and that's when I heard it. A muffled sound coming from upstairs. A sound that made my blood run cold. It was Ilari's voice, but not the voice I knew. It was a soft, intimate murmur laced with something I hadn't heard in years. I took the stairs two at a time, my heart pounding in my chest. As I reached the landing, the sound grew clearer. It was coming from our bedroom. Our bedroom. I hesitated for a moment, my hand hovering over the doorknob. A part of me didn't want to know, didn't want to shatter the illusion of the life I thought I had. But another part, a stronger, more insistent part, demanded the truth. I pushed the door open. The scene that unfolded before my eyes was like a punch to the gut. Ilari was in our bed, tangled in the sheets with a man I'd never seen before. He was younger, athletic-looking, with a cocky smirk on his face. Their clothes were scattered on the floor. The air was thick with the scent of perfume and something else, something musky and unfamiliar. Time seemed to slow down. The sounds of the rain outside faded into a dull roar. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Ilari's eyes widened in horror as she saw me standing there. The smirk vanished from the man's face, replaced by a look of startled panic. "Bastian," Ilari stammered, reaching for the sheet to cover herself. "It's not what you think. Not what I think." I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "What am I supposed to think, Ilari? That you're just having a friendly chat?" The man in the bed scrambled for his clothes, muttering apologies as he pulled on his pants. He didn't meet my gaze, and I didn't bother trying to stop him. He was irrelevant. My focus was entirely on Ilari. I can explain," she said, her voice trembling. "Explain what, Ilari? Explain how you could do this. Explain how you could betray me like this." Tears streamed down her face as she began to speak, her words a jumbled mess of excuses and justifications. She said she'd been feeling neglected, that I was always working, that she needed attention. She said it was a mistake, a moment of weakness, but her words rang hollow. I didn't believe a single one of them. "All those late nights at the studio?" I asked, my voice rising. "All those girls' nights out? Were you with him then too?" She didn't answer. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. The rage inside me was building, a firestorm of anger and betrayal. I wanted to scream, to break things, to lash out at her, but instead I just stood there, numb. The shock was starting to wear off, replaced by a deep, aching pain. "I want you to leave," I said, my voice cold and flat. "Get out of my house, Bastian, please," she begged, reaching for my hand. "Don't do this. We can work through this. We can fix this." I pulled my hand away. "There's nothing to fix, Ilari. You broke it. You broke us." She continued to plead, to cry, to beg for forgiveness. But I was done. I'd had enough. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her sobbing in our bed that she had just defiled with another man. I went downstairs and poured myself a glass of whiskey, the first of many that night. I sat in the living room, staring out at the rain-soaked street, trying to make sense of what had just happened. 15 years. 15 years of my life gone up in smoke. How could I have been so blind? How could I have not seen the signs? The next few days were a blur. Ilari moved out, taking most of her belongings with her. The house felt empty, hollow. I barely ate, barely slept. I spent my days at work going through the motions, trying to pretend that everything was normal, but it wasn't. My life had been shattered and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I told a few of my friends what had happened. They were supportive, offering words of comfort and encouragement, but their words didn't help. The pain was too deep, too raw. One evening, a week after Ilari had left, my friend Osvaldo came over. He was a lawyer and he offered to help me with the divorce proceedings. I gratefully accepted. I didn't have the energy to deal with it myself. "So, who was the guy?" Osvaldo asked as we sat in my living room going over the paperwork. "I don't know," I said. "Some random guy she was sleeping with." Osvaldo frowned. "You should find out, it could be relevant to the divorce settlement." I shrugged. "What difference does it make? She cheated on me. That's all that matters." "It could make a difference," Osvaldo insisted. "If he was paying for things, if they were planning to run off together, it could affect how the assets are divided." I sighed. He had a point. "Fine," I said. "I'll see what I can find out." I started by going through Ilari's phone records. It wasn't easy. She'd changed the password, but I managed to crack it eventually. I found a series of text messages between her and a number I didn't recognize. The messages were explicit, suggestive. It was clear that they had been having an affair for months. I traced the number to a man named Cal. I did a quick Google search and found his LinkedIn profile. He was a personal trainer at a local gym. Young, fit, and arrogant looking. Just the kind of guy Ilari would go for. I felt a surge of anger as I looked at his picture. This was the man who had destroyed my marriage. This was the man who had stolen my wife. I wanted to confront him, to make him pay for what he had done, but I knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would just make me look like a fool. Instead, I decided to dig a little deeper. I hacked into Ilari's email account. It was even easier than cracking her phone password. What I found there was shocking. Ilari and Cal weren't just having an affair. They were planning to run away together. They had been saving money, making arrangements to move to another city. They were even talking about starting a new business together, but that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what I found in a series of emails between Ilari and her sister, Freja. They were discussing my finances, my assets. They were plotting to take me for everything I had. "He's so clueless," Ilari wrote in one email. "He has no idea what's coming." "Just play along," Freja replied. "Act like you still love him. We'll bleed him dry." I felt sick to my stomach. It wasn't just an affair, it was a conspiracy. Ilari and her sister had been planning to ruin me for months. I printed out all the emails and took them to Osvaldo. He was livid. "This changes everything," he said. "We can use this to get you a much better settlement. We can even sue her for fraud." I didn't care about the money. I just wanted to make them pay for what they had done. We filed for divorce, citing adultery and conspiracy to commit fraud. Ilari was furious. She denied everything, claiming that the emails were fake, that I had fabricated them. But Osvaldo was prepared. He had subpoenaed Freja and she was forced to testify under oath. She cracked under pressure and admitted everything. The judge ruled in my favor. Ilari received a fraction of what she had hoped for. She was ordered to pay my legal fees. Cal, when he found out about the legal troubles and the fact that Ilari was broke, dumped her like a hot potato. Ilari was left with nothing. No husband, no lover, no money. She had lost everything because of her greed and her betrayal. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt happy. But I didn't. All I felt was empty. The divorce was finalized a few months later. I sold the house in the suburbs and moved back to the city. I started seeing a therapist to deal with the emotional fallout of the divorce. It took a long time, but I eventually started to heal. I learned to trust again, to love again. I even met someone new, a wonderful woman named Astrid who appreciated me for who I was. Ilari, on the other hand, never recovered. She tried to contact me several times, begging for forgiveness. But I refused to speak to her. I couldn't forgive her for what she had done. I heard through the grapevine that she was working as a waitress, struggling to make ends meet. Cal had moved on to another woman, a wealthy socialite who paid for his expensive lifestyle. Ilari was alone and miserable. One day I was walking down the street when I saw her. She was standing on a street corner holding a sign that read, "We'll work for food." She looked gaunt and her eyes hollow. I hesitated for a moment, wondering if I should say something. But then I remembered the emails, the lies, the betrayal. I remembered the pain she had caused me, and I kept walking. Some people might say that I was being cruel, that I should have shown her some compassion, but I don't regret my decision. Ilari made her choices and she had to live with the consequences. She destroyed our marriage, she tried to ruin my life, and she deserved everything that happened to her. I learned a valuable lesson from this experience. Trust is a fragile thing. Once it's broken, it can never be fully repaired. And sometimes the best revenge is simply moving on and living a happy life. Years passed. I built a new life with Astrid, filled with love, laughter, and genuine connection. We traveled, we shared dreams, and we supported each other through thick and thin. Ilari became a distant memory, a ghost from a past I preferred to forget. Then, one cold winter evening, I received a call from an unknown number. Hesitantly, I answered. A frail, raspy voice spoke on the other end. It took me a moment to recognize it. It was Freja, Ilari's sister, Bastian, she croaked. It's Ilari, she's not doing well. My first instinct was to hang up. Why should I care? She had caused me so much pain, but something in Freja's voice stopped me. There was a desperate plea in her tone that I couldn't ignore. What do you want, Freja? I asked, my voice cold. She's sick, Bastian, really sick. She has cancer. And she wants to see you, cancer. It felt like a cruel twist of fate. After all the pain and betrayal, was this her final act? A desperate attempt to manipulate me one last time? I don't know, Freja, I said, my mind racing. I don't know if I can do that. Please, Bastian, she begged. It's her last wish. She just wants to apologize, to tell you she's sorry. I thought about Astrid, about the life we had built together. I didn't want to dredge up the past to reopen old wounds. But I also couldn't shake the feeling that I would regret it if I didn't go. Tell me where she is, I said finally. Freja gave me the address of a hospice facility on the outskirts of the city. I told her I would think about it and hung up the phone. I spent the next few days wrestling with my conscience. Astrid could sense my turmoil and gently encouraged me to do what I felt was right. She understood that closure was important, even if it was painful. Finally, I made my decision. I drove to the hospice facility, my heart heavy with a mix of dread and anticipation. Freja met me at the entrance and led me to Ilari's room. As I stepped inside, I was shocked by what I saw. Ilari was lying in bed, pale and frail, her once vibrant eyes now dull and lifeless. She was barely recognizable. Bastian, she whispered, her voice weak. You came. I sat down in a chair beside her bed, trying to maintain my composure. Freja said you wanted to see me. Tears welled up in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Bastian, she said, her voice trembling. I was so foolish, so greedy. I ruined everything. I didn't say anything. I just listened as she poured out her heart, confessing her regrets, her shame, her remorse. She admitted that Cal had been a user, that he had only been interested in her money. She admitted that Freja had been the mastermind behind the scheme to defraud me. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice barely audible. But I just wanted you to know that I'm truly sorry. I loved you, Bastian, I really did. But I was too blind to see what I had until it was too late. I looked at her, lying there weak and dying, and something inside me softened. The anger and resentment that I had carried for so long began to dissipate. I realized that she had already paid the ultimate price for her mistakes. I forgive you, Ilari, I said, my voice choked with emotion. A faint smile flickered across her lips. Thank you, Bastian, she whispered. Thank you. We sat in silence for a few minutes, holding hands. It was a strange and surreal moment, filled with a mixture of sadness, regret, and forgiveness. As I stood up to leave, Ilari reached out and squeezed my hand one last time. Please, she said, be happy, Bastian. You deserve it. I nodded and walked out of the room, leaving her to rest. I knew that I would never forget her, but I also knew that I could finally move on with my life, free from the burden of the past. Ilari passed away a few days later. I attended her funeral, along with a few of her friends and family. It was a somber and mournful occasion, but I felt a sense of peace knowing that I had been able to offer her forgiveness before she died. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns. Sometimes we are faced with betrayal and heartbreak. But it is how we choose to respond to these challenges that defines us. I chose to forgive, to heal, and to move on. And in doing so, I found a new life filled with love and happiness. I never spoke to Freja again, but I heard that she had turned her life around. She had gotten sober, found a job, and was trying to make amends for her past mistakes. I hoped that she would find peace as well. As for me, I continued to live my life with Astrid, cherishing every moment we had together. I learned that love is not always easy, but it is always worth fighting for. And that forgiveness is not just for the benefit of the person who is forgiven, but also for the benefit of the person who forgives. It is a way to release the past and embrace the future. A way to find peace and happiness, even after the most painful of betrayals. And so my story comes to an end. A story of love, betrayal, forgiveness, and ultimately, redemption. A story that I hope will inspire you to choose love over hate, forgiveness over resentment, and hope over despair. For in the end, it is these choices that will determine the course of your life. My life took a turn when I discovered Ilari's infidelity and deceit. The pain was immense, but through forgiveness and moving forward, I found a new path to happiness. Remember, betrayal doesn't have to define you. It can be a catalyst for growth and a reminder to cherish genuine connections. Never let the actions of others steal your chance at happiness. I hope my story offers some comfort and perhaps a new perspective on healing and moving on. Take care.